Everybody. Oh. Um, so I'm going to talk today about an experience that we've had over the past 8 months. Chelsea is also here from the Rent Brigade, sort of the initiator of the project, and I'll mention her quite a bit. I'll basically tell the story of grassroots data advocacy movement that we built over the past 8 months, beginning in January of 2025 during the wildfires that we had in Los Angeles. And as I tell that story, there are three themes here that I just want to call out. The first one is sort of the strange ways in which crisis and action intertwine themselves. I certainly would not be here today talking to you, and I would not be involved in a project like this one if it were not for a crisis that caused all of us, everybody in our city, to drop what they were doing and try to do something to help our neighbors. The second theme is, how do we instrumentalize data? It's great to have fantastic data, but to actually transform that data into something that is meaningful, something that makes a difference in our community, we needed to do a lot more than just gather and present very good data. And I think that that's something that we've done very well, thanks really in particular to Chelsea and many of the other folks that we're working with. So that's another theme that we'll touch upon. And then the third one is just the simple experience of building data platforms as non-experts within a non-institutional context, within a non-commercial context. You know, as I'm making my way through documentation, trying to make decisions about data processing technologies, I keep finding phrases like business objectives. Well, I don't have any business objectives, right? And being a small grassroots nimble group, we had to kind of wade through we had to wade through an ecosystem that wasn't really built for us. So that's another theme that comes up for us. What I'll mostly do here is tell a story, and hopefully these themes will emerge. So just one slide about us. We're a collective of tenant organizers, advocates, programmers, designers, researchers, quite a few artists too, actually, and other Angelenos using data to fight back against predatory landlords. So this all started on January 7th, 2025, when two fires started on either side of Los Angeles, one in the west, one in the east. And these are images of people's homes after those fires. Immediately when the fire started, our governor, Gavin Newsom, declared a state of emergency, which, among other things, establishes price controls on things like rents. Much like one of the other presenters who lives in South Florida and experiences hurricanes, you can't raise the price of sandbags during an emergency. Same thing, you can't raise the price of rent during a state of emergency. And yet, Chelsea went on to the Zillow, which is the most popular rental listing website, and started to see things like this. 27% increase. This one's 2 months later. But many others where we saw 2 days later, 1 day later, the day that the fires began, dramatic increases in the rent. And so Chelsea created a spreadsheet. She created a spreadsheet and started putting listings into the spreadsheet and made a post just for friends on social media. Hey, I'm making this spreadsheet to track predatory landlords. Contribute to it if you can. And in the very beginning, this was literally a spreadsheet that anybody could enter into, that anybody could edit in any way. And my initial involvement was, okay, let's figure out how we can turn this into something that is a little bit more locked down. We created a form that feeds into the spreadsheet, those kinds of things. Just a little bit of data integrity, because the project started to become more popular than we expected very, very quickly. Later, we did figure out how to automate all of this, and I'll talk about that later. One thing that I will point out, though, is that the 15th of January is the first day for which we have programmatic data that we gathered from the rental listing websites. And that's thanks to the incredible work of really one developer, Max Stein, who in the time of a week between when the fire started and the 15th was already scraping the rental listing website. So the information about what we were doing spread very quickly, and in part, it was because the fires were a worldwide media event. Everybody in our city it was the only focus of people in Los Angeles at that time, and much of the attention nationally and globally was on these devastating fires. This is an image of Los Angeles County Supervisor Holly Mitchell, who is holding a map, and very early map that one of our collaborators made with the data that we were gathering very early on. And we brought together many, many people from our circles. Chelsea is a tenant organizer and also a policy researcher at a community-based organization in Los Angeles, and is also connected to the Masters in Urban Planning School at University of California, Los Angeles. So a lot of people from that orbit, many of whom have day jobs in public policy and housing advocacy, became involved in helping us do our work. This is really where I want to point out how critically important it was to have people who had communication skills, people who understood the local political system, local political discourse. How does power operate within the city? People that understand the specifics of what does a policy report need to look like in order to seem credible. If you're going to say there's 10,000 instances of rent gouging, which happened very quickly, we needed people who understood how to tell that story in a way that would seem credible. And these are just some of those people in our apartment. Maybe one of the other most important volunteers that we had in our group was the cook, who had instructions to feed everybody when they came over to do collaborative work sessions for no more than $5 per person. So this really was a community effort in which people just dropped what they were doing and came to help in the ways that they knew how. So one of the most important early things that we did was start to produce policy research. So in the very beginning, we had this crowdsourced data set that was compiled literally by us and anonymous people on the internet. But as I mentioned, around the 15th, we actually started gathering data programmatically. One of the nice things is that this rental listing site actually includes a price history. So those slides that I showed before, the price history is actually shown by the rental listing website. So we could see what the price was prior to the state of emergency, and we could determine if illegal price increases had occurred from that price history. So we started to gather listings and published a report very early on documenting what we were finding. And this got quite a bit of attention, and we'll talk a little bit more later on about the impact that all of that had. We saw a lot of media attention, not just in Los Angeles and in the United States, but even abroad. And we have also begun to publish kind of data dashboards and other ways for people to access the data that we're gathering on our website, which I'll show you in a little bit more detail later on. And this is our map, which has a very kind of viral quality to it that we quite like. In addition to policy reports, which are really so important for being able to insert ourselves into a policy discourse as a completely spontaneous, brand new organization, we also engaged in direct action. So we continue to host action nights where we have people from the community come. We have kind of a base of probably more than 100 volunteers who help out in some way, shape, or form. And at these nights, we do two things. One is we call the listing agents that are responsible for raising the prices, and we let them know that we see what they're doing and we ask them to lower the price. The other thing that we do is we send postcards to units that we think have been price gouged. So if tenants are victims of price gouging, we let them know, hey, we think that you've been a victim of this. Finally, there's political advocacy. So like I said, we have a lot of people that are plugged into local politics, and we even have a group of volunteers whose specific function is to show up in the city council chambers and advocate for policies that drive accountability within the local government and prosecute perpetrators of rent gouging. And then finally, we have aided some local legal organizations to bring lawsuits against landlords. And we also have somewhat open channels of communication with the prosecutorial agencies at the city, state, and local level, although they haven't taken nearly as much action on this as as we would have hoped, but we were not surprised to find that either. We have built pretty scrappily software to do all of this. So this is just a simple diagram of our system. One of our most important design requirements was spend as little money as possible. So we bought a $300 Mac Mini computer on eBay, and we do most of everything on that computer, which is chugging away in my apartment in Los Angeles as we sit here today. We have a scraper. We have a pretty simple ETL process and a database that all lives locally. And then we back up our raw data. We have Supabase, which is a cloud database that's basically serving the API that feeds our dashboards, as well as the APIs that our internal researchers use. And then we also have a little bit of S3 in the mix to drive a web map. A lot of this was kind of cobbled together. I was responsible mostly for the data pipeline component, while my colleague, Max Stein, built the scraper. I had no experience with building data products, so a lot of it was trial and error. The last thing that I want to do, if I have a couple of minutes, is just to demonstrate the scraper component, which we're just released publicly. Certainly, it's a little bit rough around the edges, this kind of public-facing version, but I just want to demonstrate that really quickly. So I'm going to pull up my terminal, and I'm just going to use npx rent scraper. It's going to think for a bit. It wants to install the package. I had it installed, but it sounds like Max pushed an update very recently. Which listings would you like to scrape? Where would I like that to be stored? That's fine. Which browser? This will use Puppeteer, so it's going to use a browser kind of embedded within the package. I have some zip codes. Let's just do 1 day. So this is sort of a freshness question of how recently how old should the listings be in terms of the time that they were most recently updated. I would like to save my file. And now we'll launch the browser. And if I encounter the CAPTCHA, I'll stop this process, but let's see if we can scrape. Oh. Let's see. Oh, it looks like we got something. So we have some errors, but we got something. Scraping is complete. And here we have our listings organized by the zip code. And then I'll also pull up QGIS, where I have earlier, I ran the same process, ran the processing pipeline, and then we have those visualized. And as a final step, with the few minutes that I have remaining, I will show you our website, where we have our map, which has all of the rent gouge listings we've ever uncovered, as well as a dashboard, which we made with a technology called Streamlit that we discovered during the process, and is really fantastic. You basically can write Python and make a dashboard that looks so much better than anything anyone ever made on Tableau. That's it. Thank you. No, I'm happy to open it to questions. 20 minutes went fast.
I kind of feel like I miss the original spreadsheet interface. Did you keep that in any form, or is it? I like spreadsheets. Is it there at all anymore?
Right now, we have the original kind of crowdsourced spreadsheet. The programmatic data we don't have in any kind of listing level format right now, mainly because we have to avoid being sued. Because we did receive some like libel cease and desist kind of notifications. we're definitely, I think, thinking about ways in which we can introduce a more granular, the data in a more granular format. But the other thing too is that we're very focused on using the data in ways that directly achieve our objectives. And while we share the listing level data with a lot of the sort of the government, we don't find that they do very much with it. And that they consume things like this much more readily. So certainly, I think it would be good for us to find ways to share the data at a more granular level. This has been working pretty well for us, but it's something that we're thinking about doing.
Thank you for the talk and congrats to the entire team. You mentioned that you've open sourced the scraper.
Yep.
I'm wondering if you've seen any interesting adaptations or applications of that since release, or any conversations that have come up about ideas for how to use it.
We hope to, but the repository became public, I think, 2 days ago in preparation for this talk. And I don't think that we've announced anything. This is the first announcement. So we're hoping to see that. Yeah, really hope to.
Is there a formal definition of what rent gouging is, or is this any increase?
There is a formal definition in the law, which in the most simple sense is a rent increase of 10%. But then there is also the case where there is not, the listing is something maybe newly listed. Perhaps it was off the market for many years. So there's this kind of provision that says, well, if there's not a previously established price within the past year, then fall back to this other formula, which is based on the United States federal government's calculation of the fair market rent.
Oh, okay.
So we basically have to calculate whether or not it's rent gouging 2 ways. And that second case is actually quite complicated because it relies upon a counterfactual, right? If there is no evidence of them having advertised or rented this unit for any price, then that calculation applies, and therefore that's price gouging. But then if they come forward and say, oh, well, I told this one prospective tenant that it was $10,000, then there's really no way to verify that. So about half of the listings fall under each of those categories. And the ones that fall into the first category were very, very confident because the definition there is strict and easy to verify. Thank you.